Do you ever do that thing where you're like, oh, I'm gonna go on Instagram for 10 minutes. And then suddenly you look up and you're like, it's been an hour? Did you know that people spend an average of 2 hours and 24 minutes on social media every day, which is 36.5 full days every single year, just scrolling. And it's not just wasted time. There's clear evidence that shows that scrolling can also lead to things like decreased motivation, decreased attention span, decreased productivity. There's even research that suggests that heavy smartphone use is linked to lower intelligence. So yeah, you might actually even be getting stupider. No. So in this video, we're actually going to look at how much mindless scrolling you do, the amount of harm that you're doing to yourself, and how to actually stop scrolling. A portion of this video is sponsored by Brilliant. You wake up in the morning with your phone next to your hand because you literally fell asleep doom scrolling. Now it is a new day, but you already feel unmotivated and exhausted. So the first thing you do is actually to take up your phone again and start scrolling a little bit more, trying to energize yourself, to motivate yourself to get out of bed. Eventually, you do manage to get up and you start getting ready to go to work or go to school. By the way, let us play a game throughout this video. Maybe like a not so fun game in which I want you to count how many of these scenarios that we'll be going through you have experienced yourself. Keep that in mind because it's going to become important later.
I'm tired, Alfred.
Scrolling makes you exhausted in a lot of different ways. It causes cognitive overload because there's so much information coming in about the pictures that you're seeing, the engagement, the likes. Processing all of that information is actually super exhausting. It also causes emotional exhaustion. As you're scrolling through, you may feel anxiety by comparing yourself to your friend. Something makes you sad, something makes you excited. This roller coaster of emotions can be super draining. There's also decision fatigue, where you're trying to decide if you want to scroll to the next post, if you want to click like, if you want to engage, if you want to comment. And it's not just in your brain. Physically, it's exhausting too, because you're probably in this very poor posture, kind of just slumped over, which causes strain in your neck and your back. It also messes with your dopamine system, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is responsible for a lot of things like motivation, attention span, alertness, general level of happiness. We'll talk about this more later in the video, but for now we can think about it like you're exhausted, so you turn to social media for a dopamine hit that can temporarily make you feel more alert and generally feel better. It's the easiest and fastest way to get dopamine. But the issue with that is that then the more you use social media, the more exhausted you become, which is like this vicious cycle. Now you're at work or school, and you're sitting down to concentrate on the task at hand. Maybe you're doing some sort of analysis, we're trying to study for your chemistry exam, but you just have zero motivation. And even when you finally get yourself to start, you just can't concentrate at all. You have your phone next to you, and when there's a notification sound that pops up, like ding, you go like, ooh, and then you go check on that, and then suddenly you are scrolling on social media again. A study of 136 students in which they're asked to sit a test. They're split into two groups. The first group of people have their phones turned off, and the second group of people had their phones turned on, and the researchers kept on sending them text messages. The group in which the phone was turned on actually scored 20% less than the group that had the phone turned off. But even intuitively, you probably already know that having notifications turned on and constantly being distracted and constantly looking through your phone and scrolling is not great for you. But the problem is that you just can't stop. It's so addictive. So the reason why it's so addictive is because it is literally designed to be so. Social media platforms are designed to hack your brain in order to get you to stay on their platform for as long as possible. There was a study by Wolfram Schultz, who is a neuroscientist that conducted a research on monkeys. When he looked at dopamine neurons in the monkeys' brains, he found that it becomes the most active when there's a signal that the reward was going to come, rather than the reward itself. You see, dopamine is often called the feel-good neurotransmitter, but really it's the anticipation of feeling good neurotransmitter. So every time the signal of having a reward was coming, the dopamine would spike in anticipation, and when it gets the reward, it goes back to baseline and the monkey is happy. So this is already great. But if the reward was actually delivered unpredictably, like say you have that signal go off, and sometimes there would be a reward, and sometimes there wouldn't be a reward, the dopamine response is actually even higher. And once the monkey actually gets a reward, it feels feels even better. Now, social media platforms use this research and apply that to humans. As you're scrolling through your feed, you have this anticipation that something's gonna pop up. You might have a like, you might see something that you really like, you might see this really cute guy that shows up. That would be like a reward, and then you feel really good. But it's unpredictable because you don't know if the next scroll is gonna give you that thing that you like or not. So social media platforms actually very deliberately make it so that you have that unpredictable anticipation, which makes scrolling so much more addictive. As you're doing this, you're also changing the wiring in your brain. You're changing your brain itself. Because of your scrolling habit and you're constantly receiving those like little doses of dopamine, over time, your brain kind of adapts to that and it becomes less sensitive to dopamine. So it means that you need to be stimulated even more in order to actually feel good about something. So a lot of other activities like exercising or like chatting with your friend, it doesn't feel as good anymore. So you get even more addicted to getting that dopamine hit from social media, leading to exhaustion and a lack of motivation. It's also decreasing your attention span, so it's very hard for you to concentrate on things. Research shows that college students that use their phone a lot have only the attention span of 65 seconds, while office workers who use their phone a lot have an average attention span of 3 minutes. How is that enough time to get anything done? So no wonder you're just being unproductive. After your not very productive day, you don't really have the energy to go do things like go to the gym or cook yourself a healthy dinner. So you just sit there and order greasy pizza and you're just kind of like scrolling again. The craziest thing is that you don't even want to watch a movie anymore because there's like a proper storyline and you kind of have to like watch a little bit longer in order to get that payoff. But since your attention span is like 65 seconds or 3 minutes, you're not able to get that fixed quickly enough. The only thing that can do that is scrolling through social media. So after eating greasy food, you just kind of just lay there and you keep scrolling and doom scrolling until you go to sleep. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's involved in a lot of different circuitry. It's involved, as we talked about earlier, motivation, attention span, alertness, general level of happiness. It's really a lot. It's super fascinating. I really recommend that you check out some of these Andrew Huberman podcasts where he goes into detail about exactly how the dopamine mechanisms work and how they relate to different behaviors. They are like 2 hours long each and will not give you that dopamine hit as much, and I'll link them in description. But I want to have a high level focus on just the amount of dopamine within your system. Generally speaking, having a higher baseline amount of dopamine is a good thing. Not too high, like too high can cause issues like schizophrenia, but generally speaking, it's better to have higher dopamine. You know, those people who are just kind of like more naturally motivated, more naturally energetic, have like higher attention spans, like those people we're all very jealous of. Those people probably just have naturally higher levels of dopamine. It's also nice to have more dopamine because a lot of things causes a decrease in dopamine. Before we get into that, I just want to go back to that little game there. How many of those scenarios have you experienced and how often have you experienced it? So if you experienced all of them and you experience them very often, I have bad news for you. You just may be like me and just have genetically low baseline of dopamine. Some other symptoms of having more of like a natural low level of baseline dopamine is if you relate to this feeling, like you're kind of like really tired, but you don't really want to sleep, but you're also too tired to do anything, so you kind of just like sit there. You're just generally low energy. You don't have much motivation for anything, and you give up on things easily, even if it's something that you actually like doing. So if this is you, welcome to the low dopamine club, and comment below that you're a member. Anyways, going back to the things that deplete your dopamine. This includes addiction, like social media addiction, because you have these little like spikes of dopamine, but that dopamine has to come from somewhere, right? It also includes poor diet. If you're not eating the correct vitamins, the correct proteins, then you're not able to produce dopamine. Chronic stress that increases your cortisol levels, which is also linked to decreased production of dopamine. Lack of sleep, sedentary lifestyles, things that are generally bad for you, it also decreases your dopamine. So this is why if you're in a low dopamine club, you're even more susceptible to these things. Since those lucky high dopamine baseline people, they have more of a cushion. So even if they're doing these like depletion activities, they still have more dopamine to play around with, right? But if you already have such low level of dopamine, you're kind of like scraping the barrel here.
Oh boy.
Cupcakes.
So hopefully now I have a better understanding of your own scrolling behaviors and really what it's doing to you, how it's affecting your life in so many different ways, and you have a better understanding of why it is that it's so hard to keep scrolling. Now, using this knowledge, let's talk about how you can decrease the amount of harm that you're doing to yourself from scrolling and to actually stop scrolling, at least minimize your scrolling. So the two concepts I want you to think about is how do you maintain or even increase your baseline amount of dopamine, and how to replenish the dopamine often, since so many things are depleting your dopamine. You can think about your baseline dopamine as like kind of this little vat that's there. And if you do nothing, the vat slowly replenishes itself. But if you do things like scroll social media, for example, then it depletes it. And if you keep doing things like scroll social media and doing these depletion activities, then it's just never going to be able to regenerate again. You're just always going to have like a pretty empty dopamine reservoir. One thing I like to do is to try to use my phone as late in the day as possible. When you wake up, you generally also have the highest amount of dopamine because since you're sleeping and not doing anything, it kind of replenishes throughout the night. So in order to preserve that dopamine and not let myself use a phone, I would do things like have a physical alarm clock, or like right now I'm traveling a lot, so I can't have a physical alarm clock, but I would at least put my phone onto airplane mode so there's a little bit of like inhibition when I'm using it as an alarm. You'll find that if you don't deplete your dopamine that much, it actually becomes easier for you to continue on that habit. Suddenly you feel a lot more motivated, suddenly you have a better attention span, and you are not like as tempted as you were before. It also becomes easier to do things like eating more healthily, having better conversations with friends and hanging out with friends, reading books, consistently going to the gym. All of these things will also keep your dopamine level more stabilized and actually increase your baseline dopamine as well. However, life happens, right? There will be things that deplete your dopamine. So another thing you can focus on is how you can replenish your dopamine. My personal favorite method, which I got from Andrew Huberman, is by doing something that you really, really don't like. The idea is that just like you're anticipating something that you would like to have and your dopamine spikes, if you're anticipating something that you really don't want to do, then your dopamine decreases. But whatever goes up must come down, and whatever goes down must come back up, right? So if you think about doing something that you really, really don't like, it means that your dopamine would decrease a lot. And when you actually do the activity, your dopamine will go back to baseline very quickly as well. So this is a really great hack to quickly regenerate your dopamine. The two things that I personally dislike the most is cold showers and push-ups. Let me know what you dislike the most in the comments below. I also go in more in depth about how dopamine works and how all of this relates to each other. In this video over here, I'll also put the timestamp here, which is where I start talking about dopamine. So now that you've actually stopped scrolling, you suddenly gain 2 hours and 24 minutes per day. One of the best ways in order to use that time is to learn something new. If you're interested in learning more about STEM subjects, including computer science and artificial intelligence, you should check out Brilliant, the sponsor of this portion of the video. Thank you, Brilliant. Brilliant is such a great platform for learning STEM subjects that it's actually recommended by big tech companies like Meta to use Brilliant to brush up on things like math and stats and computer science techniques. And the reason why it's so effective for learning STEM subjects is that it's very interactive and problem-based. If you're currently healing your short attention span, Brilliant is also great to check out because they have a lot of those little dopamine fixes built into the platform itself, so it would help you concentrate better. Using those same techniques that social media platforms do, but actually for learning something, doing something good with it. Whenever I want to learn a new STEM subject, I always go on Brilliant to see if there's a course available there. And usually they do because they keep really good pace with new technologies that are developing, like large language models. I really love their Introduction to Large Language Models course. You don't even need to know how to code, and it just teaches you how large language models work under the hood. They also have timeless offerings like math and stats, physics, and computer science, which, as you all know, I'm very biased towards. You can head on over to this link over here, also linked in description, to get started for free. If you go through my link, get 20% off an annual membership. Thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this portion of the video. Alright, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video or live stream.